Hi. Hello, hello. How you doing? I'm gonna put that on very quietly. But hi. Hello. Um so yeah, tonight I have it with a different title uh where it's pretty much chatting a bit of, just very casual stuff. Pardon me, something we good? I think we good. Okay. So, yeah, I was thinking about it, and something I've wanted to do for a while is basically it would be kind of a reading stream. Where pretty much I'll be reading a book on here. Um, Now I had one weird idea about it though. Would it be better to show the text, or would it be better to have like um you know a just have it with me right here. Hi. Hello. That is very loud. Hi, thank you for the follow. uh that actually scared me. I was so quiet. um but yeah, I was trying to find a version of the stuff that was um hello. Let's see. I wonder if I can get this. Oh, wait, can I actually get the entire text on here? Oh, shoot, I can. So, I do have a question. Since I will be reading pretty much the entire time, should I have the text up? I mean, I can. Or I can just read. Either one. I think it's basically like, would you prefer subtitles or would you just prefer to see me read? With all of you kind of like over here. I haven't actually done a reading stream before, so that's kind of why this is a bit of an experiment. Um, hmm. The entire text is available online for free though, so yeah. Uh, this is a free to use book to read. Um, so let me see. Can I um let's see if I can add this as a source. And question mark. Oh, Fregalitis, thank you for the follow. Yeah, I'm still slightly setting up just because I haven't actually done a reading stream before. So, I was trying to put the text on, and so far it's not working. But I can probably get that taken care of very quickly. But yeah, welcome. Uh, yeah. So the story we're actually gonna do tonight is the Seven Voyages of Sinbad, the sailor. Um, I've always really loved the Arabian Nights, and this just seemed like a very it seemed like a nice one to start off with. A lot of people recommended like the Count of Monte Cristo, but that thing is huge. This is a lot shorter. Um which I'll actually put this would be the link to it of what I'm using if you want to follow along. Um right there. And yeah, this is just available free. I love free stories. Um how do I wait, can I? actually do this? Oh shoot, is that actually gonna work? No, that's not gonna work. Well, you know what? Enough lollygagging around. I'll probably just start reading. And we'll go with it from there. And if there's anyone who wants to add anything, feel free to. So, hey Snowfield, how you doing? I'm about to start reading. Got like the whole Sinbad thing up. Actually, I got a book with it, so I'm gonna be using that version. But I did just link in chat like a version right up there. Oh, okay. Well, welcome, welcome. Yeah, I just cooked tonight. I had like Italian crusted pork chops. They were amazingly good. Downright juicy, perfectly cooked, 150 degrees inside, with a topping of Italian herbs and cheese, and a bit of sour cream, as well as a piece of roasted garlic underneath for added flavor. Delicious. But, yeah. Without further ado, I'll just start reading, because, heck, it's a good book. So, The History of Sinbad the Sailor. In the reign of the same caliph, Harun al-Rashid, whom I mentioned in my last story there, lived in Baghdad a poor porter who was named Sinbad. One day, during the most violent heat of summer, he was carrying a heavy load from one extremity of the city to the other. Much fatigued by the length of the way he had already come, and with much ground yet to traverse, he arrived in a street where the pavement was sprinkled with rosewater, and a grateful coolness refreshed the air. Delighted with this mild and pleasant situation, he placed his load on the ground and took his station near a large mansion. The delicious scent of aloes and frankincense. Hey, Noel. Hi. I'm still reading. How you doing? I'm just reading the Legend of Sinbad, so if you're interested, I can post a little link to it, and that's just in case you want to follow along. Wow, I pasted the entirety of the thing. That is not what I wanted to do. Ah, there we go. There we go. So if you want to follow along, there we go. And mixing with the delicious scent of aloes and frankincense which issued from the windows and mixing with the fragrance of the rosewater perfumed the air. The sound of a charming concert issuing from within the house accompanied by the melody of the nightingales and other birds peculiar to the climate of Baghdad. All this, added to the smell of different sorts of viands, led Sinbad to suppose that some grand feast was in progress here. He wished to know to whom this house belonged, for not having frequent occasion to pass that way, he was unacquainted with the names. Yep, reading story. I do hope you'll like it. He was unacquainted with the names of the inhabitants. To satisfy his curiosity, therefore, he approached some magnificently dressed servants who were standing at the door and inquired who was the master of that mansion. "What?" replied the servant. "Are you an inhabitant of Baghdad and did not know that this is the residence of Sinbad the Sailor, that famous voyager who has roamed over all the seas under the sun?" The porter, who had heard of the immense riches, appeared so enviable with his own deplorable position, and distressed by the reflection. He raised his eyes to heaven and exclaimed in a loud voice, "Almighty Creator of all things, deign to consider the difference that there is between Sinbad and myself. I suffer daily 1,000 ills, and have the greatest difficulty in supplying my wretched family with bad barley bread, whilst the fortunate Sinbad lavishes his riches in profusion, and enjoys every pleasure. What has he done to attain so happy a destiny? Or what crime has been mine to merit a fate so rigorous?" As he said this, he struck the ground with his foot, like a man entirely abandoned to despair. He was still musing on his fate, when a servant came towards him from the house, and taking hold of his arm, said, "Come, follow me. My master Sinbad wishes to speak with you." 1 second. I'm going to be drinking water a lot, because Mm, that's good. Also, just for clarity's sake, normally you can't read stuff because technically that is the MCA. However, due to the nature of how old this story is, excuse me, uh, it's free. It's free online. You can just read it to whoever wants to listen. So, just want to make sure everyone knows on that. Continuing on, Hinbad was not a little surprised at the compliment thus paid him. Remembering the words he had just uttered, he began to fear that Sinbad sent for him to reprimand him, and therefore he tried to excuse himself from going. He declared that he could not leave his load in the middle of the street, but the servant assured him that it should be taken care of, and pressed him so much to go that the porter could no longer refuse. His conductor led him into a spacious room, where a number of persons were seated around a table, which was covered with all kinds of delicate viands. In the principal seat sat a grave and venerable personage, whose long white beard hung down to his breast, and behind him stood a crowd of officers and servants, ready to wait on him. This person was Sinbad. Quite confused by the number of the company and the magnificence of the entertainment, the porter made his obeisance with fear and trembling. Sinbad desired him to approach, and seating him at his right hand, helped himself to the choicest dishes, and made him drink some of the excellent wine, with which the sideboard was plentifully supplied. Also, real quick, just checking, is the background music distracting at all? Just curious. If it is, I'll go ahead and mute it. I just want to make sure you're all able to hear the story. If that's quite alright. I just want to make sure that, like, it is... This is, again, an experiment. So... Anyways, I'll keep going. Towards the end of the... Boy, that's a typo. Towards the end of the repast, Sinbad, who perceived that his guest had done eating, began to speak, and addressing Hindbad by the title "my brother," the common salutation amongst the Arabians when they converse familiarly, he inquired the name and profession of his guest. "Sir," replied the porter, "my name is Hindbad." "I am happy to see you," said Sinbad. "I can answer for the pleasure the rest of the company also feel at your presence. But I wish to know, from your own lips, what it was you said just now in the street." For Sinbad, before he went to dinner, had heard from the window every word of Hindbad's... Wow, they actually used the old... Boy, this is some words. For Sinbad, before he went to dinner, had heard from the window every word of Hindbad's ejaculation, which was the reason of his sending for. At this request, that's the word I got in here, alright? That's the text. I am reading directly. At this request, Hindbad, full of confusion, hung down his head and replied, "Sir, I must confess to you that, put out of humor by weariness and exhaustion, I uttered some indiscreet words, which I entreat you to pardon." "Oh," resumed Sinbad, "do not imagine that I am so unjust as to have any resentment on that account. I feel your situation, and instead of reproaching you, I pity you heartily. But I must undeceive you on one point respecting my own history, in which you seem to be in error. You appear to suppose that the riches and comforts I enjoy have been attained without any labor or trouble. In this you are mistaken. Before attaining my present position, I have endured for many years, the greatest mental and bodily sufferings that you can possibly conceive. Yes, gentlemen," continued the venerable host, addressing himself to the whole company, "I assure you that my sufferings have been so acute that they might deprive the greatest miser of his love, of riches. Perhaps you have heard only a confused account of my adventures in the 7 voyages I have made on different seas. And as an opportunity now offers, I will, with your leave, relate the dangers I have encountered, and I think the story will not be uninteresting to you. As Sinbad was going to relate his history chiefly on the porter's account, he gave orders before he began it to have his guest's burden, which had been left in the street, brought in and placed where Hindbad should wish. When this matter had been adjusted, he spoke in these words. And now we go into the first voyage of Sinbad the Sailor. I squandered the greater part of my paternal inheritance in youthful dissipation, but at length I saw my folly and became convinced that riches were not of much use when applied to such purposes as those to which I had devoted them. And I reflected that the time I spent in dissipation was of still greater value than gold, and that nothing could be more truly deplorable than poverty in old age. I recollected the words of the wise Solomon, which my father had often repeated to me, that it is better to be in the grave than poor. Feeling the truth of this reflection, I resolved to collect the small remains of my patrimony and to sell my goods by auction. I then formed connections with some merchants who trafficked by sea and consulted those who appeared best able to give me advice. In short, I determined to employ to some profit the small sum I had remaining, and no sooner was this resolution formed than I put it into execution. I repaired to Balsora, where I embarked with several merchants in a vessel which had been equipped at our united expense. We set sail and steered towards the East Indies by the Persian Gulf, which is formed by the coast of Arabia Felix on the right and the Persian shore on the left. It is commonly supposed to be 70 leagues in breadth in the widest part. Beyond this gulf, the Western Sea, or Indian Ocean, is very spacious and is bound by the coast of Abyssinia, extending in length 4,500 leagues to the island of Vakvak. I was at first troubled with the sickness that attacks voyagers by sea, but I soon recovered my health, and I have never afterwards been subject to that malady. In the course of our voyage, we touched at several islands and sold or exchanged our merchandise. One day, when our vessel was in full sail, we were unexpectedly becalmed before a small island which appeared just above the water, and in its verdure resembled a beautiful meadow. The captain ordered the sails to be lowered and gave permission to those passengers who wished to go ashore, and of this number I formed one. But while we were regaling ourselves with eating and drinking and enjoying ourselves after the fatigues we endured at sea, the island suddenly trembled, and we felt a severe shock. The people who had remained in the ship perceived the earthquake in the island, and immediately called us to re-embark as soon as possible, or we should all perish. For that, what we supposed to be an island was nothing but the back of a whale. The most active of the party jumped into the boat, whilst others drew themselves into the water to swim to the ship. As for me, I was still on the island, or more properly speaking, on the whale. When it dived below the surface, I had only time to seize a piece of wood which had been brought to make a fire with, when the monster disappeared beneath the waves. Meantime, the captain, willing to avail himself of a fair breeze which had sprung up, set sail with those who had reached his vessel, and left me to the mercy of the waves. I remained in this deplorable situation the whole of that day and that following night. On the return of morning, I had neither strength nor hope left. But a breaker happily threw me on an island. The shore was high and steep, and I should have found great difficulty in landing had not some roots of trees, which fortune seemed to have furnished for my preservation, assisted me. I threw myself on the ground, where I continued lying more than half dead till the sun rose. Though extremely enfeebled by the fatigues I had undergone, I still tried to creep about in search of some herb or fruit that might satisfy my hunger. I found some, and had also the good luck to meet with a stream of excellent water, which contributed not a little to my recovery. Having in a great measure regained my strength, I began to explore the island, and entered a beautiful plain. Pardon, I lost my place. Where I perceived a horse grazing. I bent my steps towards it, trembling between fear and joy, for I could not ascertain whether I was advancing to safety or perdition. I remarked as I approached that the creature was a mare tied to a stake. Her beauty attracted my attention, but whilst I was admiring her, I heard from underground the voice of a man who shortly after appeared, and coming to me asked me who I was. I related my adventure to him, whereupon he took me by the hand and led me into a cave, where I found some other persons who were not less astonished to see me than I was to meet them there. 1 second, gonna have a little bit extra water. Oh, good stuff. I do hope y'all enjoying this too. I ate some food which they offered me, and upon my asking them what they did in a place which appeared so barren, they replied that they were grooms to King Mirage, who was the sovereign of that isle, and that they came hither every year, about this season, with some mares belonging to the king, for the purpose of having a breed between them and a seahorse, which came on shore at that spot. They tied up the mares as I had seen, because they were obliged, almost immediately, by their cries to drive back the seahorse, which otherwise began to tear the mares in pieces. As soon as the mares were with foal, they carried them back, and the colts were called sea colts, and set apart for the king's use. They told me that the morrow was the day fixed for their departure, and if I had been 1 day later, I must certainly have perished, because they lived so far off that it was impossible to reach their habitations without a guide. 1 second. Alright. Let's see. Ah. Where is it? Did I skip a page? No. Let's see, they told me that tomorrow... Habitations without a guide. Ah, found it. Sorry about that. Whilst they were talking to me, the horse rose out of the sea, as they had described, and immediately attacked the mares. He would have torn them to pieces, but the grooms began to make such a noise that he let go his prey and again plunged into the ocean. The following day they returned with the mares to the capital of the island, whither I accompanied them. On our arrival, King Mirage, to whom I was presented, asked me who I was, and by what chance I had reached his dominions. And when I had satisfied his curiosity, he expressed pity at my misfortune. At the same time, he gave orders that I should be taken care of, and be supplied with everything I might want. These orders were executed in a manner that proved alike the king's generosity and the exactness of his officers. As I was a merchant, I associated with persons of my own profession. I sought in particular, such as were foreigners, partly to hear some intelligence of Baghdad, and partly in the hope of meeting someone with whom I could return. For the capital of King Mirage is situated on the seacoast and has a beautiful port, where vessels from all parts of the world daily arrive. I also sought the society of the Indian sages, and found great pleasure in their conversation. But this did not prevent me from attending at court very regularly, nor conversing with the governors of provinces, and some less powerful kings, tributaries of Mirage, who were about his person. They asked me 1,000 questions about my country, and I was not less inquisitive about the laws and customs of their different states, or whatever particulars appeared to merit my curiosity. In the dominions of King Mirage, there is an island called Cassel. I had been told that in that island there was heard every night the sound of cymbals, and this had given rise to the sailor's opinion that de Gial had chosen that spot for his residence. I felt a great desire to witness these wonders. During my voyage, I also saw some fish of 1 and 200 cubits in length, which occasion much fear, but do no harm. They're so timid that men frighten them away by beating on a board. I remarked also some other fish that were not above a cubit long, and whose heads resembled that of an owl. After I returned, as I was standing one day near the port, I saw a ship come towards the land. When the crew had cast anchor, they began to unload its goods, and the merchants to whom the cargo belonged took it away to their warehouses. Happening to cast my eye on some of the packages, I saw my name written thereon, and having attentively examined them, I recognized them as the same which I had embarked in the ship in which I had left Balsora. I also recollected the captain, but as I felt assured that he thought me dead, I went up to him and did I just get a follow? No. Okay, I thought I got a notification. I was just being completely derp. Let's see. Let me turn that on, just in case. All right. I felt assured that he thought me dead. I went up to him and asked him to whom those parcels belong. I had on board with me, replied he, a merchant of Baghdad named Sinbad. One day when we were near an island, or at least what appeared to be one, he went ashore with some other passengers on the supposed island, which is nothing but an enormous whale that had fallen asleep on the surface of the water. The fish no sooner felt the heat of the fire, they lighted on its back to cook their provisions, then it began to move and flounce about in the sea. Most of their persons who were on it were drowned, and the unfortunate Sinbad was one of them. That if I meet with any of his family, I may be able to pay over to them the profit I shall have made on the principal. Captain, said I then, I am that Sinbad, whom you suppose dead, but who is still alive, and these parcels are my property and merchandise. When the captain of the vessel heard me speak thus, he exclaimed, Great God, whom shall I trust? There is no longer truth in man. With my own eyes I saw Sinbad perish. The passengers I had on board were also witnesses of his death. And you have the assurance to say that you are that same Sinbad? What impudence is this? At first sight you appeared a man of property and honor, yet you assert an impious falsity, to possess yourself of some merchandise which does not belong to you. Have patience, replied I, and do me the favor to listen to what I have to say. Well, cried he, what can you have to say? Speak and I will hear. I then related in what manner I had been saved, and by what accident I had met with King Mirage's grooms, who had brought me to his court. The captain was rather staggered at my discourse, but was soon convinced that I was not an impostor. For some people who arrived from his ship knew me, and began to congratulate me on my fortunate escape. At last he recollected me himself, and embracing me exclaimed, Heaven be praised that you have happily escaped from the great peril. Can I express the pleasure I feel at your safety? Here are your goods, take them, for they are yours, and do with them what you like. I thanked him, and praised his honorable conduct, and by way of acknowledgment, I begged him to accept part of the merchandise, but he refused to take anything. I said, I've never played Assassin's Creed Black Flag. That would be a lot of fun sometime. Go on a pirate yo-ho adventure. Just going all over the place. Alright. I selected the most precious and valuable things in my bales as presents for King Mirage. As this prince had been informed of my misfortunes, he asked me where I had obtained such rare curiosities. Excuse me. I related to him the manner in which I had recovered my property, and he had the condescension to express his joy at my good fortune. He accepted my presents, and gave me others of far greater value. Hereupon I took my leave of him, and re-embarked in the same vessel in which I had come. Having first exchanged what merchandise remained for the products of the country, consisting of aloes and sandalwood, camphor, nutmegs, cloves, pepper, and ginger. We touched at several islands, and at last landed at Balsora, from whence I came here. Having realized about 100,000 sequins, I returned to my family and was received by them with the joy of true and sincere friendship. I purchased slaves of both sexes and bought a magnificent house and grounds. Thus I established myself, determined to forget the hardships I had endured, and to enjoy the pleasures of life. And there is, if you're looking at the site, there is small pictures that go along with this. Thus Sinbad concluded the story of his first voyage, and he ordered the musicians to go on with their concert, which he had interrupted by the recital of his history. The company continued to feast till night approached, and when it was time to separate, Sinbad ordered a purse containing 100 sequins to be brought to him, and gave it to the porter, with these words: "Take this, Sinbad, and return to your home and come again tomorrow, to hear the continuation of my history." The porter retired quite confused by the honor conferred on him, and the present he had received. The account he gave of his adventure to his wife and children rejoiced them greatly, and they did not fail to return thanks to Providence for the bounties bestowed by means of Sinbad. Sinbad dressed himself in his best clothes on the following day, and betook himself to the house of his liberal patron, who received him with smiling looks and a friendly air. As soon as the guests all had arrived, the feast was served, and they sat down to eat. When the repast was over, Sinbad thus addressed his guests: "My friends, I request you to have the kindness to listen to me while I relate the adventures of my second voyage. They are more worthy of your attention than were those of my first." The company were silent, and Sinbad began to speak as follows. I'm actually enjoying this. I forgot how much I enjoy the original Arabian Nights. The first time I read these stories, I had it was basically a book a librarian had gifted me. They were just like, well, we had to get rid of some books. I was like, well, I mean, I'll take them. I mean, free books, you know? And the original Arabian Nights were among them. I used to be way more into book reading. Like, way, way more. I would take a book and literally, I would sit in the same position for like 6 hours and just go through the entire thing. I've never read Harry Potter, oddly enough. But classics, things like Sherlock Holmes, things like the Arabian Nights. Oh my God, I love these. They were so good. But what confused me, especially, was I had only been exposed to Disney's version of the Arabian Nights. The version provided by, like Aladdin and stuff. But I noticed when I was reading the actual one. Actually, wait. Oh, I remember when I first saw this. So the reason I first realized there was a difference, oddly enough, Sonic the Hedgehog. I was playing Sonic and the Secret Rings, and I'm like, the hell is this Genie of the Ring thing? It's a Genie of the Lamp. There is only a Genie of the Lamp. Yeah, Sonic and the Secret Rings. Turns out, Sonic and the Secret Rings is more accurate to the original story than freaking Disney. I found that so funny when I first read it. Sonic the Hedgehog. Go figure. Yeah, there were multiple genies. There's actually a ton of them. And one of the main ones was whatchamacallit? The Genie of the Ring, obviously. And that was pretty much the main one through the story. And also the Genie of the Lamp. Yeah. But what I found really fascinating, I don't remember it being limited to 3 wishes. I think it allowed for more. And there was also, like, jeweled fruits. There was a lot of stuff to it. Though, speaking of that, that will be for another reading stream. Tonight is Sinbad. All Sinbad. And we'll probably go through, quite a few of the voyages. So, with that little tangent, let's continue. As I had the honor to tell you yesterday, I had resolved, after my first voyage, to pass the rest of my days in tranquility at Baghdad. But I soon grew weary of an idle life. The desire of seeing foreign countries and carrying on some traffic by sea returned. I bought merchandise which I thought likely to answer in the enterprise. Hello, Diamond. Hi, I'm reading. I meditated, and I set off a second time. Oh, by the way, Diamond, in case you're not aware, we're reading the Voyages of Sinbad, the Sailor, from the original Arabian Nights. So, yeah, that's going to be, it's actually a really good story so far. I do hope you enjoy listening. Let's see. But I soon grew weary of an idle life. The desire of seeing foreign countries and carrying on some traffic by sea returned. I bought merchandise, which I thought likely to answer in the enterprise I meditated, and I set off a second time with some merchants, whose probity I could rely on. We embarked in a good vessel, and recommending ourselves to the care of Allah, we began our voyage. We went from island to island, and bartered our goods very profitably. One day we landed on one which was covered with a variety of fruit trees, but so desert that we could not discover any habitation. Hey Kitsu! Heyo! I am reading a bunch of stuff. Actually, yeah, and as the title says, I'm reading The Seven Voyages of Sinbad. So, you're welcome to stay by and listen along. And, yeah, let me see if I can get a link to it. Let's see. Here it is. So if you want to follow along, I am currently on the second voyage. About a paragraph or two in. So that's in case you want to read along with me. One day we landed on one which was covered with a variety of fruit trees, but so desert that we could not discover any habitation, or the trace of a human being. And you're welcome. We walked in the meadows and along the brooks that watered them, and while some of my companions were amusing themselves with gathering fruits and flowers, I took out some of the wine and provisions I had brought with me, and seated myself by a little stream under some trees, which afforded a delightful shade. I made a good meal of what I had with me, and when I had satisfied my hunger, sleep gradually stole over my senses. I cannot say how long I slept, but when I awoke, the ship was no longer in view. I was much surprised at this circumstance, and rose to look for my companions, but they were all gone, and I could only just descry the vessel in full sail at such a distance that I soon lost sight of it. You may imagine what were my reflections when I found myself in this dismal state. I thought I should have died with grief. I groaned and shrieked aloud. I beat my head and threw myself on the ground where I remained a long time, overwhelmed by a rushing current of thoughts, each more distressing than the last. I reproached myself 1,000 times for my folly in not being contented with my first voyage, which ought to have satisfied my craving for adventure. But all my regrets were of no avail, and my repentance came too late. At length, I resigned myself to the will of heaven, and not knowing what would become of me, I ascended a high tree, from whence I looked on all sides, to try if I could not discover some object to inspire me with hope. Casting my eyes toward the sea, I could discern only water and sky, but perceiving on the land side a white spot, I descended from the tree, and taking up the remainder of my provisions, I walked towards the object, which was so distant that at first I could not distinguish what it was. As I approached, I perceived it to be a ball of prodigious size, and when I got near enough to touch it, I found it was soft. I walked round it to see where there was an opening, but could find none, and the ball appeared so smooth that any attempt to climb it would have been fruitless. Its circumference might be about 50 paces. The sun was then near setting. The air grew suddenly dark, as if obscured by a thick cloud. I was surprised at this change. How much did my amazement increase when I perceived it to be occasioned by a bird of most extraordinary size, which was flying towards me. I recollected having heard sailors speak of a bird called a rook, and I concluded that the great white ball which had drawn my attention must be the egg of this bird. I was not mistaken, for shortly afterwards it lighted on the white ball and placed itself as if to sit upon it. When I saw this huge fowl coming, I drew near to the egg so that I had one of the claws of the bird just before me. This claw was as big as the trunk of a large tree. I tied myself to the claw with the linen of my turban in hopes that the rook, when it took its flight the next morning, would carry me with it out of the desert island. My project succeeded, for at break of the day the rook flew away and bore me to such a height that I could no longer distinguish the earth. Then it descended with such rapidity that I almost lost my senses. When the rook had alighted, I quickly untied the knot that bound me to its foot, and had scarcely released myself when it darted on a serpent of immeasurable length, and seizing the snake in its beak, flew away. 1 second, gonna have some more water. I'm loving this story. The place in which the rook left me was a very deep valley, surrounded on all sides by mountains of such height that their summits were lost in the clouds, and so steep that there was no possibility of climbing them. This was a fresh embarrassment, for I had no reason to rejoice at my change of situation, when I compared it with the island I had left. As I walked along the valley, I remarked that it was strewn with diamonds, some of which were of astonishing size. 1 second. Pardon me. I amused myself for some time by examining them, but soon perceived from afar some objects which destroyed my pleasure, and created in me great fear. These were a great number of serpents, so long and large that the smallest of them would have swallowed an elephant with ease. Oh yeah, Treasure Island is. Though I wanted to make sure that this was old enough to be in open domain. If a book is open domain, I can read it on stream. And I just so happen to have the Arabian Nights, and I was like, oh, yeah, let's do this. If Treasure Island opens up, I might do that later. So, future streams. This isn't, from what I can tell, this is not going to be the only reading one. I like this. It's nice and chill. Alright, so a great number of serpents that would have swallowed an elephant with ease. During the daytime, they hid themselves in caves from the rook, their mortal enemy, and only came out when it was dark. I passed a day in walking about the valley, resting myself occasionally when an opportunity offered, and when the sun set, I retired into a small cave, where I thought I should be in safety. I closed the entrance, which was low and narrow, with a stone large enough to protect me from the serpents, but which yet allowed a little light to pass into the cave. I supped on part of my provisions, and could plainly hear the serpents, which began to make their appearance. Their tremendous hissings caused me a great fear, and as you may suppose, I did not pass a very quiet night. When the day appeared, the serpents retired. I left my cave with trembling, and may truly say that I walked a long time on diamonds, without feeling the least desire to possess them. At last, I sat down, and notwithstanding my agitation, after making another meal off my provisions, I fell asleep, for I had not once closed my eyes during all the previous night. I had... 1 second, I lost my place. I fell asleep, for I had... Oh, there we are. Reason is in case of bots. There's been a lot of bots recently, so I'm just doing this as a precaution. That's the only reason. Let's see. Where was I? Ah. I had scarcely begun to doze when something falling near me, with a great noise, awoke me. It was a large piece of fresh meat, and at the same moment I saw a number of other pieces rolling down the rocks from above. Ah. Okay. Well, unfortunately, that's just how it really is meant for bots, because they have been pretty much torturing everybody, and so far I haven't had a single bot, which, that means it's working, I guess. I mean, they smacked everybody else, and I'm completely just quiet. I love it. I believe he can. Oh! Yep, he can follow. That is so loud. Ow. Yeah. But I'll get back to the story real quick. I had always supposed the account to be fictitious, which I had heard related by seamen and others, of the Valley of Diamonds, and of the means by which merchants procured these precious gems. I now knew it to be true. The method of proceeding is this. The merchants go to the mountains which surround the valley about the time that the eagles hatch their young. They cut large pieces of meat and throw them into the valley, and the diamonds on which the lumps of meat fall stick to them. The eagles, which are larger and stronger in that country than in any other, seize these pieces of meat to carry to their young at the top of the rocks. These merchants then run to the eagle's nest and by various noises oblige the birds to retreat, and then take the diamonds that have stuck to the meat. This is the method they employ to procure the diamonds from the valley, which is inaccessible on every side. I had supposed it impossible to leave this valley, and began to look on it as my tomb. But now I changed my opinion, and turned my thoughts to the preservation of my life. I began by collecting the largest diamonds I could find, and with these I filled my leather bag, in which I had carried my provisions. I then took one of the largest pieces of meat, and tied it tight around me with the linen of my turban. In this state, I laid myself on the ground, tightly securing my leather bag around me. Oop, I just realized this is pinging off. My bad. Okay. I had not been long in this position before the eagles began to descend, and each seized a piece of meat, with which it flew away. One of the strongest darted onto the piece to which I was attached, and carried me up with it to its nest. The merchants then began their cries to frighten away the eagles, and when they had obliged the birds to quit their prey, one of them approached, but was much surprised and alarmed on seeing me. He soon, however, recovered from his fear, and instead of inquiring by what means I came there, began to quarrel with me for trespassing on what he called his property. "You will speak to me with pity instead of anger," said I, "when you learn by what means I have reached this place. Console yourself, for I have diamonds for you as well as for myself. My diamonds are more valuable than those of all the other merchants added together. I have myself chosen some of the finest at the bottom of the valley, and have them in this bag." Saying this, I showed him my store. I had scarcely finished speaking when the other merchants, perceiving me, flocked round me with great astonishment, and their wonder was still greater when I related my history. They were less surprised at the stratagem I had employed to save myself than at my courage in attempting to put it in execution. They conducted me to the place where they lived together, and on seeing my diamonds, they all expressed their admiration, and declared they had never seen any to equal them in size or quality. The nest into which I had been transported belonged to one of these merchants, for each merchant has his own. I entreated him, therefore, to choose for himself from my stock as many as he pleased. He contented himself with taking only one, and that too was the smallest I had, and as I pressed him to take more without fear of wronging me, he refused. "No," he said, "I am very well satisfied with this, which is sufficiently valuable to spare me the trouble of making any more voyages to complete my little fortune." I passed the night with these merchants, to whom I recounted my history, a second time, for the satisfaction of those who had not heard it before. I could scarcely contain myself for joy, when I reflected on the perils that I had gone through. It appeared as if my present state was but a dream, and I could not believe that I had nothing more to fear. The merchants had been for some days in that spot, and as they now appeared to be contented with the diamonds they had collected, we set off all together on the following day, and traveled over high mountains, which were infested by prodigious serpents, but we had the good fortune to escape them. We reached the nearest port in safety, and from thence embarked for the island of Roja, where the tree grows from which camphor is extracted. This tree is so large and thick that 100 men may easily take shelter under it. The juice of which the camphor is formed runs out at an incision made at the top of the tree, and is received in a vessel where it remains till it acquires a proper consistency and becomes what is called camphor. After the juice has been extracted, the tree withers and dies. The rhinoceros is a native of this island. It is a smaller animal than the elephant, yet larger than the buffalo. It has a horn on its nose about a cubit in length, This horn is solid and cut through the middle from one extremity to the other, and on it are several white lines, which represent the figure of a man. The rhinoceros fights with the elephant, and piercing his enemy's body with its horn, carries him off on his head. But as the fat and blood of the elephant run down on his eyes and blind him, he falls on the ground. And what is more wonderful than all, the rook comes and seizes them both in its claws and flies away with them to feed its young. Utterly thick tree. Extra thick tree. I will pass over several of the peculiarities of the island, lest I should tire you. I exchanged some of my diamonds for valuable merchandise. We set sail for other islands, and at last, having touched at several ports, we reached Balsora, from which place I returned to Baghdad. The first thing I did was distribute a great deal of money amongst the poor, and I enjoyed with credit and honor the remainder of my immense riches, which I had acquired with much labor and fatigue. Here Sinbad closed the relation of his second voyage. He again ordered 100 sequins to be given to Hindbad, whom he invited to come on the morrow, to hear the history of the third. The guest returned home, and the following day repaired at the usual hour to the house of Sinbad, where the porter, who had almost forgotten his poverty, also made his appearance. They sat down to the table, and when the repast was ended, Sinbad requested the company to attend to him, and he began to tell the story of his third voyage. Alright, how y'all enjoying that one? That was with the rook. That big old giant bird. It is big. Huge. Actually, an interesting thing. I believe, not many people like it, but Final Fantasy 15, they have, Thunder Rook. And with that enemy, it's really a massive bird, but you can get the actual size, if you're curious, of what the rook might have been in the story. Let's just say it huge. It really huge. It is a big bird. It is a giant bird. Probably make some good fried chicken too, you know? But yeah, each of these voyages are a fantastic journey. I do still want to see the DreamWorks movie. They did make Sinbad the movie. And supposedly it looks really good. Very underrated. But yeah, I definitely want to give it a check. Anyways, let me have a little bit extra water, and we will go on to the third voyage. Delicious water. That battery cleaning water. The third voyage. The agreeable life I led in my prosperity soon obliterated the remembrance of the dangers I had encountered in my 2 voyages. But as I was in the prime of my life, I grew tired of passing my days in slothful repose, and banishing all thoughts of the perils I might have to face. I set off from Baghdad with some... Okay, you have a good one. But, yeah. When you come back, we'll be, still reading. I just realized Sinbad is a glutton for punishment. He's like, I went for a voyage because I wanted adventure. Oh god, I got abandoned. Oh no. I'm about to die. I got saved. Money. I go home. Money. Yay. No longer have to deal with any sort of problem. Anyways, I got bored. So let's go on another voyage. I got abandoned. I got threatened by snakes. It's danger everywhere. Money! I got saved. I get to go home. Prosperity. I'm rich. So anyways, I got bored again. He's not just very tanky. He's like, I did adventure because I was bored. Oh god, it sucks. But I got money. Oh no, I'm bored again. Time to go on another adventure. Oh no, I was abandoned. Hey, I got money. Oh god, I got abandoned again. Oh well, I got back. Uh, yeah. Anyways, I got bored again. It's kind of funny. And managing all thoughts of the perils I might have to face, I set off from Baghdad with some rich merchandise of the country. The usual workday. We made a long voyage and touched at several ports, and by these means carried on a very profitable commerce. One day, as we were sailing in the open sea, we were overtaken by a violent tempest, which made us lose our reckoning. The storm continued for several days and drove us near an island, when the captain would have, which the captain would have gladly have avoided approaching. But we were under the necessity of casting anchor there. When the sails were furled, the captain told us that this region and some of the neighboring isles were inhabited by hairy savages who would come to attack us. He further declared that, although they were only dwarfs, we must not attempt to make any resistance, for as their number was inconceivable. If we should happen to kill one, they would pour upon us like locusts and destroy us. This account put the whole crew in terrible consternation, and we were too soon convinced that the captain had spoken the truth. We saw coming towards us an innumerable multitude of hideous savages, entirely covered with red hair and about 2 feet high. They threw themselves into the sea and swam to the ship, which they soon completely surrounded. They spoke to us as they approached, but we could not understand their language. They began to climb the sides and ropes of the vessel, with so much swiftness and agility that their feet scarcely seemed to touch them, and soon came swarming upon the deck. You may imagine the situation we were in, not daring to defend ourselves nor even to speak to these intruders to endeavor to avert the impending danger. They unfurled the sails, cut the cable from the anchor, and after dragging the ship ashore, obliged us to disembark. Then they conveyed us to another island from whence they had come. All voyagers carefully avoided this island, for the dismal reason you are going to hear, but our misfortune had led us there, and we were obliged to submit to our fate. We left the shore, and penetrating farther into the island, we found some fruits and herbs, which we ate to prolong our lives as much as possible, for we all expected to be sacrificed. As we walked, we perceived at some distance a large building, towards which we bent our steps. It was a large and lofty palace, with folding gates of ebony, which opened as we pushed them. We entered the courtyard and saw facing us a vast apartment with a vestibule on one side of which was a large heap of human bones, while on the opposite side appeared a number of spits for roasting. We trembled at the spectacle, and as we were fatigued with walking, our legs failed us, and we fell on the earth, where we remained a considerable time, paralyzed by fear and unable to move. The sun was setting, and while we were in this piteous state, as I have described, the door of the apartment suddenly opened with a loud noise, and there entered a black man of frightful aspect, and as tall as a large palm tree. In the middle of his forehead gleamed a single eye, red and fiery as a burning coal. His front teeth were long and sharp and projected from his mouth, which was as wide as that of a horse. With the under lip hanging on his breast, his ears resembled those of an elephant, and covered his shoulders, and his long and curved nails were like the talons of an immense bird. At the sight of this hideous giant, we all fainted, and remained a long time like dead men. At last our senses returned, and we saw him seated under the vestibule, glaring at us with his piercing eye. When he had scanned us well, he advanced towards us, and stretching forth his hand to seize me, took me up by the pole and turned me round every which way, as a butcher would handle the head of a sheep. After having well examined me, finding me meager, and little more than skin and bone, he released me. He took up each of my companions in their turn and examined them in the same manner, and as the cabin was the fattest of the party, he held him in one hand as I should hold a sparrow, and with the other ran a spit through his body. Then kindling a large flame, he roasted him, and ate him for his supper in the inner apartment, to which he retired. When he had finished his repast, He returned to the vestibule where he lay down to sleep and snored louder than thunder. Oh, all right. Have a nice lurk. He did not wake till the next morning, but we passed the night in the most agonizing suspense. When daylight returned... Oh, thank you for the host, Diamond. Appreciate it. Let's see. But we passed the night in the most agonizing suspense. When daylight returned, the giant awoke and went abroad, leaving us in the palace. When we supposed him at some distance, we began to give vent to our lamentations, for the fear of disturbing the giant had kept us silent during the night. The palace resounded with our groans. Although there were many of us, and we had but one common enemy, the idea of delivering ourselves by his death never occurred to any one of us. But however difficult an accomplishment such an enterprise might have been, we ought to have made the attempt at once. We deliberated on various methods of action. Also good. Oh, and lava cake is delicious. Though, this part is a bit gruesome. So, apology if it spoils your appetite a little. We deliberated on various methods of action, but could not determine on any. And submitting ourselves to the will of Allah, we passed the day in walking over the island, and eating what plants and fruit we could meet with, as we had done the preceding day. Towards the evening, we sought for some shelter in which to pass the night, but finding none, we were obliged to return to the palace. The giant duly returned to sup on one of our companions. After his hideous meal, he fell asleep and snored till daybreak, when he arose and went out as before. Our situation appeared to be so hopeless that some of my comrades were on the point of throwing themselves into the sea, rather than be sacrificed by the horrible monster, and they advised the rest to follow their example. But one of the company thus addressed them: "We are forbidden to kill ourselves, and even were such an act permitted, would it not be more rational to endeavor to destroy the barbarous giant who has destined us to such a cruel death?" Oh, okay. That's still a good cake. As I had formerly formed a project of that nature, I now communicated it to my fellow sufferers, who approved of my design. "My friends," said I then, "you know that there is a great deal of wood on the seashore. If you will take my advice, we can make some rafts, and when they are finished, we will leave them in a proper place so we can find an opportunity to make use of them. In the meantime, we can put in execution the design I propose to you to rid ourselves of the giant. If my stratagem succeeds, we may wait here with patience till some vessel passes, by means of which we may quit this fatal isle. If, on the contrary, we fail, we shall have recourse to our rafts and put to sea. I own that in exposing ourselves to the fury of the waves on such fragile barks, we run a great hazard of losing our lives. But if we are destined to perish, is it not preferable to be swallowed up by the sea than to be buried in the entrails of that monster who has already devoured two of our companions?" My advice was approved by all, and we immediately built some rafts, each large enough to support 3 persons. We returned to the palace toward evening, and the giant arrived a short time after us. Again, one of our party was sacrificed to his inhuman appetite, but we were soon revenged on him for his cruelty. Well, at least you didn't borrow from the story of people being eaten. But we were soon revenged on him for his cruelty. After he had finished his horrible meal, he laid himself down as usual to sleep. As soon as we heard him snore, 9 of the most courageous among us and myself took each a spit, and heating the points red hot, thrust them into his eye and blinded him. The pain the giant suffered made him groan hideously. He suddenly raised himself and threw his arms about on all sides to seize someone, and sacrifice to his rage. But fortunately, we had time to get at some distance from him, and to throw ourselves on the ground in places where he could not set his feet on us. After having sought us in vain, he at last found the door and went out, bellowing with pain. We quitted the palace immediately after the giant and repaired to that part of the shore where our rafts lay. We set them afloat and wait till daybreak before embarking on them, in case we should see the giant approach, with some guide to lead him to us. But we hoped that if he did not make his appearance by that time, and if his cries and groans, which now resounded through the air, ceased, we might suppose him dead. And in that case we proposed remaining in the island till we could obtain some safer mode of transport. But the sun had scarcely risen above the horizon when we perceived our cruel enemy, accompanied by two giants nearly as huge as himself, who led him, and a great number of others who walked very rapidly before him. At this sight we immediately ran to our rafts, and rowed away as fast as possible. The giants, seeing this, provided themselves with large stones, hastened to the shore, and even ventured to their waists into the sea to hurl the stones at us, which they did so adroitly, that they sunk all the rafts excepting that I was upon. Thus I and two companions were the only men who escaped, the others being all drowned. As we rowed with all our strength, we were soon beyond the reach of the stones. When we had gained the open sea, we were tossed about at the mercy of the winds and waves, and we passed that day and night in the most cruel suspense. But on the morrow, we had the good fortune to be thrown on an island, where we landed with great joy. We found some excellent fruit, which soon recruited our exhausted strength. When night came on, we went to sleep on the seashore, but were soon awakened by the sound made on the ground, by the scales of an immense serpent, long as a palm tree. It was so near to us that it devoured one of my companions. Notwithstanding the efforts he made to extricate himself from its deadly grasp, for the serpent shook him several times, and then, crushing him on the earth, quickly swallowed him. My other comrade and myself immediately took to flight, and although we had flown some distance, we heard a noise which made us suppose that the serpent was crushing the bones of the unhappy man it had destroyed. On the following day, we perceived our suspicions had been well founded. "Oh, Allah," I then exclaimed, "what a horrible fate will be ours! Yesterday we were rejoicing at our escape from the cruelty of a giant and the fury of the waves, and today we are again terrified by a peril not less dreadful." As we walked along, we remarked a large and high tree, on which we proposed to pass the following night, hoping we might be there in safety. We ate some fruit as we had done on the preceding day, and at the approach of night we climbed the tree. We soon heard the serpent, which came hissing to the foot of a tree. It raised itself against the trunk, and meeting with my companion, who had not climbed so high as I, it swallowed him and retired. I remained on the tree till daybreak, when I came down more dead than alive. Indeed, I could only anticipate the same fate. This idea chilled me with horror, and I advanced some paces to throw myself into the sea. But as life is sweet as long as it will last... Aw. Man. It's nice when you have good cake, but it's sad when you don't. I hope you can make good cake soon. But as I resisted the impulse of despair, and submitted myself to the will of Allah, who disposes of our lives as is best for us, I collected a great quantity of small wood and furs, and tying it... I will pass that word, because that is... Yeah, that word I will pass, though it basically means bundles. It used to be the term for a cigarette, apparently. So, yeah, passing on that word, put it round the tree in a large circle, and tied some across to cover my head. I enclosed myself within the circle when the evening came on, and sat down with a dismal consolation that I had done all in my power to preserve my life. The serpent returned with the intention of devouring me, but he could not succeed, being prevented by the rampart I had formed. The whole night he was watching me as a cat watches a mouse. At last day returned and the serpent retired, but I did not venture out of my fortress till the sun shone. I was so fatigued. Ugh, God, that is a... Why does a cake taste like grape? Ew. A grape cake. Ugh. I was so fatigued with watching as well as with the exertion of forming my retreat, and had suffered so much from my enemy's pestilential breath, that death appeared preferable to a repetition of such horror. I again ran towards the sea with the intention of putting an end to my existence, but Allah pitied my condition, and at that moment that I was going to throw myself into the sea, I descried a vessel at a great distance. I cried out with all my strength and unfolded and waved my linen turban to attract the attention of those on board. This had the desired effect. All the crew saw me, and the captain sent a boat to bring me off. As soon as I was on board, the merchants and seamen were eager to learn by what chance I had reached that desert island. Diamond, don't eat bad food. Bye-bye. I hope you feel better. Learned by chance I had reached the desert island, and after I had related to them all that had happened, the oldest of them told me that they had often heard of the giants. Oh, okay. Giants who lived in that island, that they were cannibals, and that they devoured men raw as well as roasted. With regard to the serpents, they added that there were many in that island, which hid themselves in the day and roamed forth for prey at night. They expressed their joy at my fortunate escape from so many perils. Then, as they supposed I must be in want of something to eat, they pressed upon me the best they had. And the captain, observing that my clothes were much torn, had the generosity to give me some of his. We remained a considerable time at sea, and touched at several islands. At length, we landed on the island of Salahat, where the sandalwood is cultivated, which is much used in medicine. We entered the port and cast anchor, and the merchants began to unload their goods, to sell or exchange them. One day the captain called me to him and said, "Brother, I have in my possession some goods which belong to a merchant who was for some time on board my ship. As this merchant is dead, I am going to have them valued, that I may render an account of them to his heirs, should I ever meet them." The bales of which he spoke were already upon deck. He showed them to me, saying, "These are the goods. I wish you to take charge of them, and traffic with them, and you shall receive for your trouble what is usually given in such cases." I consented, and thanked him for the opportunity he afforded me of employing myself. The clerk of the ship registered all the bales with the names of the merchants to whom they belonged. When he asked the captain in what name he should register those destined for my charge, the captain replied, "In the name of Sinbad the sailor." I could not hear my own name without emotion, and looking at the captain, I recognized in him the very same person who in my second voyage had left me on the island where I had fallen asleep by the side of a brook, and who had put to sea without waiting for me. I did not at first recollect him, so much was he changed in appearance since that time when I last saw him. As he thought me dead, it is not to be wondered at that he did not recognize me. Captain," said I to him, "was the merchant to whom these things belong called Sinbad?" "Yes," returned he. "That was his name. He was from Baghdad and embarked on board my vessel at Balsora. One day, when he went ashore on an island for fresh water, he was left behind. I know not through what mistake. None of the crew noticed his absence till 4 hours after, when the wind blew so fresh against us that it was impossible to return." "You believe him to be dead?" said I. "Most assuredly," replied the captain. "Then open your eyes," cried I, "and convince yourself that the same Sinbad whom you left in the desert island is now before you. I fell asleep on the banks of a little stream, and when I awoke, I found the ship was gone." At these words the captain fixed his eyes on me, and after scrutinizing me very attentively, at last recollected me. "God be praised," cried he, embracing me. "I am delighted that fortune had given me an opportunity of repairing my fault. Here are your goods, which I have preserved with care, and always had valued at every port I stopped at. I return them to you with the profit I have made on them. I received them with the gratitude due to such honesty." From the island of Salahad we went to another, where I provided myself with cloves, cinnamon, and other spices. When we had sailed some distance, we perceived an immense tortoise, 20 cubits in length, and the same in breadth. We also saw a fish that had milk like a cow. Its skin is so hard that bucklers are frequently made of it. I saw another fish that was of the shape and color of a camel. At length, after a long voyage, we arrived at Balsora, from whence I came to Baghdad, with so much wealth that I did not know the amount of it. I gave a great deal to the poor, and brought a considerable quantity of land. Sinbad thus finished the history of his third voyage. Again, he gave Hindbad 100 sequins, inviting him to the usual repast on the morrow, and promising he should hear the account of the fourth voyage. Hindbad and the other guests retired, and on the following day returned, at the same hour. When dinner was over, Sinbad continued the relation of his adventures. So, that one had cannibals and giant snakes. Sinbad really has been through a lot of crap. Dude literally had, like, freaking just evil snakes. There's a lot of snakes. Giant snakes. Like, the first one he started, it was, what was that? Oh, right. The first one was with the whale. And then suddenly he met a bunch of violent seahorses and found his crew. Second voyage, second voyage was the snakes and birds, the giant rook, and all the diamonds. The third voyage was a bunch of red tiny people. Red, you know what? I just want to imagine them as like Animal from the Muppets. Animal, the dude that plays the drums. I just want to imagine a bunch of like 2-foot dudes like him, just bringing him to a group of cannibals, Cyclop cannibals. I'm almost getting tired reading myself a bedtime story, I swear. Myself a little stretched. I'm gonna have myself a little snack too, just because. Got some peanuts, unsalted, just pure peanuts. Thank you. Hold up. Oh, also, I changed their redeems around a little. Thank you for that hydrate. Actually, let's take a little break for a minute and just chat for a bit, you know? Hey, Diamond. I'm just eating some peanuts and chilling. That was a fun third voyage. But, the Adventures of Sinbad really are like, it's always, I love when there's a good adventure. I really wanted to read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. That one I always loved. I had an original version on like VHS. That's Spanish, isn't it? Hold up. Actually, I don't actually speak Spanish, but let me see if I can figure this out. Oh, it does. It looks like a Pong game with a buggy ball at the bottom. Yeah, it kind of does. This whole thing right here, and then this, and then that. Yeah, so you see, I just completely, that's part of the thing. I just completely go in whatever Pong thing is playing right now. Um, but yeah, I do like this. Bink, 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 pew. Ah, sorry, he said Pong game, and I had to. That was perfect. But yeah, welcome. I think that's Ericono. I don't actually speak Spanish, unfortunately, but you are welcome to stay by if you want. Um, I'm just really bad at other languages. Mais je parle un peu de français. C'est ma langue deuxième. Ah, well, you're welcome to say bye for the story, Viola. It'll be here. You can always spend time with us. Wait, is it? Wait, what language is it actually? Oh, it's Portuguese. I'm stupid. Sorry. God, that was loud. Ow. I deserve that after making that mistake. Sorry about that. Portuguese and Spanish do look a little bit similar. But they are different. They are different. I've just only had experience with Spanish before, so that's what I assumed. Interesting, though. Yeah, I completely failed to look at what language it was detected. My bad. I don't speak Portuguese either, turns out. At most, I speak limited French. And I've been trying to learn some Japanese on the side when possible. Still though, I think we've pretty much had a good break, and should be about time to get back to the storytelling. Oh, okay. Well, sure, you can if you'd like. Though, just keep in mind with the chat rules, I try not to do like anything political thing on my channel. Nope. I just stick with being chill. You know, I'm just here to entertain, not any statements. I'm an anime dude online. But yeah, I am curious what the questions are. Oh. Hmm. Mm-mm. Yeah, feel free to. Mm-hmm. Um, though, I may start up with reading again. And we'll go on to the fourth voyage. 3 countries? So you got Canada, United States, Mexico, you got, or do you mean South America with like Brazil, uh, Chile, Argentina, all that kind of area? Or do you mean like Central America with like Panama, Guatemala, um, that sort of area? I usually go with, I think I did all 3. Technically, there's like, uh, yeah, there's a bunch of countries. Mm. Mm-mm. All right. We'll start up reading again. And If you got your question by like a paragraph break, I'll go ahead and answer it right then. But I'll continue with reading. Actually, a little bit more water. But it has to be dry. The pleasures and amusements in which I indulged after my third voyage had not a charm sufficiently powerful to deter me from venturing on the sea again. I gave way to my love for traffic and adventure. I settled my affairs and furnished myself with the merchandise suited to the places I intended to visit, and set out, and traveled towards Persia. One second. Some of the provinces of which I traversed, till I at last reached a port, where I embarked. We set sail and touched at several ports of the mainland, and at some of the Oriental islands. But one day, while tacking the ship, we were surprised by a sudden squall of wind, which obliged the captain to lower the sails. He gave the necessary orders for encountering the danger which threatened us, but all our precautions were fruitless. The squall burst upon us. Our sails were torn in it would threaten us, but all our precautions were fruitless. The squall burst upon us. Our sails were torn in 1,000 pieces, and the vessel, becoming ungovernable, was driven on a sandbank and went to pieces. A great number of the crew perished, and the cargo was swallowed up by the waves. Aren't there two Portuguese? I know there's one for sure. Let's see. There's got to be another dialect. Like, even with Spanish, there's Catalan, and then there's another dialect. Do you mean the language, or do you mean, like, regions where... Oh. Wait a minute. I want to say yeah. Just because, with, just a wide amount of regions there is, again, there's a difference even in the Americans between, like, who's from what country, even though everyone's American. And so, oh, language? I only know of one, but it would be bad to assume that there is, like, less than one. Oh, Kana, hello. Hi. How you... You haven't followed me yet? That long? Dude. Welcome, though. Hi. Nice to see you here. I've been reading. Yeah, I know. I'm like, wait. I was like, wait, you haven't been followed this entire time? Ah, welcome, welcome. But yeah, for the language. Based on the idea of dialects, I would like to say that there are two. Just because that's just, you know, there's more than one French. There's more than one Spanish. I would assume there's more than one Portuguese. But yeah, hi. So yeah, I've been reading Sinbad the Sailor. So far you've missed a giant whale, seahorses and stuff. The rook, which is a giant freaking bird with diamonds and giant snakes. An island with a bunch of, like... Oh, May, hello, with the raid of 19. Hi. Hello. I see, let me give you a quick little shout out. Did that work? Okay. Oh, you're playing the Pokemon TCG. Hello, Boomy. Nightwalker. All of you. Wow, there's a lot of people. Hello. Nice to see y'all. Portuguese spoken. That's the one I knew about, but then I also knew about Brazil. The South American one is different. I knew it. Oh, and thank you for the follow, Nightwalker. Wow, thank y'all for coming by. So, hi. In case you've never her, dude. I'm a dude. Oh, May person. May's not a dude. Wait, hold up. May is a very nice person who has honestly been like absolutely treat to talk with since I started. Oh, and Domodeno, thank you for the follow as well. Look, I misread. I misread, May. Hold up, I've been reading Swords for the Time. Pardon me. I'm stuck on this text. Look, I'm like, who is this person? I missed the May. I missed the May. I thought he just said, who was this person? I know who you are. Jason. We were playing a Pokemon game and opening up the freaking, what was it? The Eevee pack things earlier. Of course I know who you are. Actually, I haven't opened up Pokemon cards in I don't know how long. I used to enjoy getting the secret rares. Those were so nice. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Yeah, for anyone who doesn't know who I am, my name is Ernest Machina, Technolich VTuber. This heart down here is where my soul is, and yeah, I play a whole ton of variety of stuff. And tonight, it was kind of an experiment. I wanted to do a reading stream. And I pretty much found out, if you have a book that's old enough, well, if you got a book that's old enough, you can read it on stream with no issue. Oh, no, Steven Universe. I'm just not Steven Universe in the slightest. It's actually more of a mix of, the Tin Man. It's basically based on the Tin Man from, Wizard of Oz, but with my own flair because Tin Man is, you know, him. But, I've got the heart. I stole it from him. I ran out. Yeah, pretty much I am the Pong that is stuck between these two paddles on the side. But, yes. Hello and welcome. As for what we're doing tonight, I've been reading, the Arabian Nights, the Voyages of Sinbad. Currently gone through the first 3, and we're on the 4th one. The first one was basically, dude went out and was like, adventure! Let's go onto a beach and enjoy the life. Turns out the beach was a freaking whale and sank, and a whole bunch of people died, and he lived. He then went to a, island, and he went, hi people, how are you doing? I don't know who you are, but hello. Help me? And they were like, oh, by the way, we are trying to do special horses with seahorses and actual horses. And, yeah, we gotta be here so that they don't kill each other. Sinbad was like, aight. Then they go back to the palace, and the king's like, oh, you were in danger. Well, you know what? Enjoy your time here, enjoy your tales. You can stay here for a bit. And then he was like, awesome. Hey, is that my ship? Hey, king, I got goods. You want them? Here. By the way, bye. And he went back home with a bunch of riches. Okay, now to summarize the second voyage. Sinbad was like, I'm rich. Okay, I'm bored now. Let's go on another adventure. And he and his crew went like, ba. And they were like, oh, this is a nice place. It's a little bit deserted, though. But you know what? Let's just rest here for a minute. And Sinbad was like, oh, okay, cool. I'm just going to rest here by this river. And then his crew was like, alright, bye. And they just left him. And they just left him there to whatever. And he was just like, oh, there goes my ship. shit. All right, well, let me climb a tree and see what I can see. And he's like, oh my god, there's a giant ball over there. Screw it, I'm gonna head to the giant ball. And he did, and he's like, oh my god, that is an egg. That is a giant bird. Holy shit. And he tied himself to the bird's leg and was like, wee. And then he went into a valley that was full of like giant snakes and diamonds. And he's like, awesome, diamonds. Oh shit, snakes. And he basically hid in a cave. And then he was like, how am I getting out of here? And he was just like, someone just threw down meat. There's more meat. I'm gonna strap it to myself. And then he strapped it to himself, and the birds picked him up and flew him to their nest, and he went there with a bunch of diamonds. And he's like, hey, by the way, dude, thank you for letting me use your bird. You can have some diamonds if you'd like, but I'm just trying to live. And dude's like, I bet. Whoops. And then, yeah, that was pretty much the second voyage. Third voyage, Sinbad's like, I'm rich. I'm bored again. Let's go on an adventure. And then he goes, da 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 da. And they end up getting close to a very bad island, where a bunch of short, hairy, red things, I don't know, they were covered in fur, basically go onto the ship. They can't speak the language. And they're like, by the way, come with us. Yeah. And they pretty much took his ship and shoved it onto land. And you're like, well, I'm scared for my life. Might as well go with them. You do. And he ends up finding a giant monster cyclops cannibal thing. And he's like, oh shit. And then the captain gets like stabbed, like skewered and roasted and eaten. And he's like, oh shit. And then they try to figure out a way to escape. They blind the Cyclops, and then they're like, oh, well, time to go to the beach. You know what? Let's just stay there with our rafts for a bit and just hope we are okay. Then like 3 more Cyclops show up, and they're like, nope, out of here. Yeah, then the Cyclops just chuck rocks and destroy all the other rafts, and his is the only one that stays. And he's like, well, that sucks. But at least we're alive, and we're on an island with fruit. We can live. And then the snake eats his friend. And then he's like, shit. Well, let's go to a tree and climb high. And he do. With his friend. His remaining friend. And he's like, alright, we're safe. And his friend is like, okay, cool. They fall asleep. The snake eats his other friend. And he's like, yeah, shit. I'm gonna die. Then he ends up making like a little fortress away from the snake and hides himself. And he manages to get to an actual island. I mean, actual island. Actual area where he's saved. Because he travels with another ship. Turns out, funny coincidence, that ship happens to be the one that literally ditched him in the second voyage. And he's like, oh, cool. I got all my money back. I'm gonna make bank! And so he does, and then he goes back home completely, utterly, filthy, stinking rich. And the captain honored it, which was nice. Anyways, we're about to start on the 4th voyage. So, the 4th voyage, we will start now. Boy, that was a quick recap. The pleasures and amusements in which I indulged... Oh, actually, by the way, May, if you're still here, let me know if you got any good pulls, alright? I like seeing good pulls. The pleasures and amusements in which I indulged after my 3rd voyage had not charms sufficiently powerful to deter me from venturing on the sea again. I gave way to my love for traffic and adventure. I settled my affairs and furnished myself with the merchandise suited to the places I intended to visit, and set out, and traveled towards Persia, some of the provinces of which I traversed, till I at least reached a port where I embarked at. We set sail and touched at several ports of the mainland, and at some of the oriental islands. But one day while tacking ship, we were surprised by a sudden squall of wind, which obliged the captain to lower the sails. He gave the necessary orders for encountering the danger which threatened us, but all our precautions were fruitless. The squall burst upon us, our sails were torn in 1,000 pieces, and the vessel, becoming ungovernable, was driven on a sand bank and went to pieces. A great number of the crew perished, and the cargo was swallowed up by the waves. I mean, a Victinian Lugia is nice. Actually, I've got a ton of Lugias. But still, those ain't bad. Those sound pretty good. But yeah, those boxes can be a pain. With some other merchants and seamen, I had the good fortune to get a hold of a plank. We were all drawn by the strength of the current towards... Oh, I forgot to mention, in case you want to follow along, nope, not that. This. I'm on 4th voyage. That's in case you wish to read along. We found some fruits and fresh water, which recruited our strength, and we lay down to sleep in the spot where the waves had thrown us, without seeking to explore the land on which we had been cast. The grief we felt at our misfortune renders us careless as to our fate. The next morning, when the sun was risen, we left the shore, and advancing on to the island, perceived some habitations, towards which we bent our steps. When we drew near, a great number of blacks came forward and, surrounding us, made us prisoners. They seemed to divide us among themselves and then led us away to their houses. This is the original text, by the way. So, yeah. I'll try to make sure, like, keep in mind the language of the old original stuff. 5 of my comrades and myself were taken into the same place. Our captors made us sit down and then offered us a certain herb, inviting us by signs to eat of it. My companions, without considering that the people who offered it to us did not eat of it themselves, only consulted their hunger and devoured it greedily. I had a sort of presentiment that this herb was given to us for no good purpose, and refused even to taste it. And it was well I did so, for a short time after I perceived that my companions soon lost all sense of their position, and did not know what they said. The men then served us with some rice dressed with the oil of a coconut, and my comrades, not being sensible of what they did, ate ravenously of this mess. I likewise partook of it, but fed sparingly. The men had given us the herb first to turn our brains, and thus banish the sorrow which our miserable situation would create, and the rice was given to fatten us. As these men were... What the hell is this? Anthropophagi? They designed to feast on us when we were in good condition. My poor companions fell victims to the barbarous custom of these wretches, because they had lost their sentences, and could not foresee their destiny. As for me, instead of fattening as the others had done, I grew thinner every day. The fear of death which constantly haunted me poisoned the food I took, and I fell into a state of languor, which was in the end very beneficial to me. For when the men had devoured my comrades, they were content to let me remain till I should be worth eating. In the meantime, I was allowed a great deal of liberty, and my actions were scarcely observed. This afforded me the opportunity one day of quitting the habitation of the men and escaping. An old man who watched me and guessed my intention called me to return, but I only quickened my pace and soon got out of his sight. This old man was the only person in the neighborhood. All the other men had absented themselves, as was their frequent custom, and were not to return until night. Being therefore certain that they would be too late to come in search of me when they returned home, I continued my flight till evening, and then stopped to take a little rest and satisfy my hunger. I soon set out again, and walked for 7 days, taking care to avoid those places continually, which appeared inhabited, and living on coconuts, which afforded me both drink and food. On the 8th day, I came to the seashore, and here I saw some white people employed in gathering pepper, which grew very plentifully in that place. Their occupation was a good... Something nice? Let's see. Hmm. Well. Thinking real quick. I want to get something good that's nice. Also, don't want some docs worthy, you know? What would the fate have been? Hell, you got that MP5 of the exact one you wanted. That's actually really something good for you. I mean, heck, you've got most of them. But I mean, the fact you got MP5, like the previous time you had the event, you got like, it took you so long to even get MP1, and now you got MP5. That's awesome. And heck, you've even got the event on lock. So, that is something good. You know? Anyways, back to the story. They came towards me as soon as they perceived me, and asked me in Arabic from whence I came. Delighted to hear my native language once more, I readily satisfied their curiosity, and related to them the manner in which I had been shipwrecked, and how I had come to that island, where I had fallen into the hands of the natives. But these natives are cannibals, said they. By what miracle did you escape their cruelty? I gave them the same account which you have just heard, and they were very much surprised. Ah, well, I do hope you feel better soon. You're always welcome to be here, though. Some didn't play. Was there... Eh? Sound alerts is on. Oh. Yeah, ghost pepper sauce will... Viola, of course that's what's making you feel bad. Ghost pepper sauce will absolutely wreck you. Let's see.
Wow.
Oh, jeez. Okay. I mean, it works. I guess the points just didn't go through. I scared myself. Yeah, ghost pepper sauce will wreck your entire night. It did? I mean, well, I got it though. I see nothing for the request though, so I have no idea what happened, unfortunately. Yeah. I think that's just a thing glitching, possibly. Sorry about that. But you got it anyways, because I redeemed it all myself. Anyways, back to the story. Hopefully less spicy than the ghost pepper. I remained with them until they had collected as much pepper as they chose to gather. They made me embark with them in the vessel which had conveyed them, and we soon reached another island, from whence they had come. My deliverers presented me to their king, who was a good prince. He had the patience to listen to the recital of my adventures, which astonished him, and he ordered me some new clothes, and desired I might be taken care of. This island was very populous, and abounded in all sorts of articles for commerce, which was carried on to a great extent in the town where the king resided. The pleasantness of my new quarters began to console me for my misfortunes, and the kindness of this generous prince made me completely happy. Indeed, I appeared to be his greatest favorite. Consequently, all ranks of people endeavored to please me, so that I was soon considered more as a native than a stranger. I remarked one thing which appeared to me very singular. Every one, the king not excepted, rode on horseback without saddle, bridle, or stirrups. On one day took the liberty to ask his majesty why such things were not used in this city. He replied that he had never heard of the things of which I spoke. I immediately went to a workman and gave him a model from which to make the tree of a saddle. When he had executed his task, I myself covered the saddle tree with leather, richly embroidered in gold, and stuffed it with hair. I then applied to a locksmith who made me a bit and some stirrups, also according to the patterns I gave him. When these articles were completed, I presented them to the king, and tried them on one of the horses. The prince then mounted his steed, and was so pleased with his accoutrements that he testified his approbation by making me considerable presents. I was then obliged to make several saddles for his ministers and the principal officers of his household, who all rewarded me with very rich and handsome gifts. I also made some for the wealthiest inhabitants of the town, by which I gained great reputation and credit. As I constantly attended at court, the king said to me one day, "Sinbad, I love you, and I know that all my subjects who have any knowledge of you think with me, and entertain a high regard for you. I have one request to make, which you must not deny me." "O king," replied I, "there is nothing your majesty can command which I will not perform. To prove my obedience to your orders, your power over me is absolute." I wish you to marry," resumed the prince, "that you may have a tender tie to attach you to my dominions, and prevent your returning to your native country." As I did not dare to refuse the king's offer, he bestowed on me in marriage a lady of the court, who was noble, beautiful, rich, and accomplished. After the ceremony of the nuptials, I took up to my abode in the house of my wife, and lived with her for some time in perfect harmony. Nevertheless, I was discontented with my situation, and designed to make my escape at the first convenient opportunity and return to Baghdad, for the splendid establishment I possessed in this new country could not obliterate my native city from my mind. While I was thus meditating an escape, the wife of one of my neighbors, with whom I was very intimate, fell sick and died. I went to console the widower, and finding him in the deepest affliction, I said to him, "May God preserve you and grant you a long life." "Alas," replied he, "how can I obtain what you wish me? I have only 1 hour to live." "Oh," resumed I, "do not suffer such dismal ideas to take possession of your mind. I hope that I shall enjoy your friendship for many years." "I wish for all my heart that," said he, "that your life may be of long duration. As for me, the die is cast, and this day I shall be buried with my wife. Such is the custom which our ancestors have established in this island, and which is still invariably observed. The husband is interred alive with his dead wife, and the living wife with the dead husband. Nothing can save me, and everyone submits to this law." Oh shit. Whilst he was relating to me this singularly barbarous custom, the bare idea of which filled me with terror, his relations, friends, and neighbors came to make arrangements for the funeral. They dressed the corpse of the woman in the richest attire, as on the day of her nuptials, and decorated her with all her jewels. They then placed her on an open bier, and a procession set out. The husband, dressed in mourning, went immediately after the body of his wife, and the relations followed. They bent their course towards a high mountain, and when they had reached the summit, a large stone was raised which covered a deep pit, and the body was let down into the pit, in all its sumptuous apparel and ornaments. Thereupon the husband took his leave of his relation. Wait, was that the Was that the Did you try to do another redeem for like a voice line? Because it is not giving you the redeems. Oh dear. You might need to refresh the page possibly. But I'll do it for you anyways. Just because. "Hi, I'm Zeranis, and I'm famous. Google me and you will see." But you might need to refresh the page possibly. That might be why. Ba-da-ba-dum. Thereupon the husband took his leave of his relations and friends, and without making any resistance, suffered himself to be placed on a bier with a jug of water and 7 small loaves by his side. Oh, yeah, I probably do. Actually, I think when you Google me, I show up with made mint, maybe. I don't know. That was what happened last time. Um, he was then let down into the pit as his wife had been. This mountain extended to a great distance, reaching even to the seashore, and the pit was very deep. When the ceremony was ended, the stone was replaced and the company retired. I need scarcely tell you that I was particularly affected by this ceremony. All the others who were present did not appear to feel it deeply, for they had become habituated to see the same kind of scene. I could not avoid telling the king my sentiments on this subject. "O king," said I cannot express my astonishment at the strange custom which exists in your dominions, of interring the living with the dead. I have visited many nations. But in the whole course of my travels, I never heard of so cruel a decree." "What can I do, Sinbad?" replied the king. "It is a law common to all ranks, and even I submit to it. I shall be interred alive with the queen my consort, if she happens to die first." "Will your majesty allow me to ask," resumed I, "if strangers are obliged to conform to this custom?" "Certainly," said the king, smiling at the obvious motive of my question. "They are not exempt when they marry in the island." I returned home thoughtful and sad. The fear that my wife might die before me, and that I must be interred with her, distressed me beyond all measure. Yet how could I remedy this evil? I must have patience and submit to the will of God. Nevertheless, I trembled at the slightest indisposition of my wife, and alas, I soon had good reason to fear. She was taken dangerously ill and died in a few days. To be buried alive appeared to me as horrible a fate as being devoured by those guys, the cannibals. Yet I was obliged to submit. The king, accompanied by his whole court, proposed to honor the procession with his presence, and the principal inhabitants of the city also, out of respect to me, were present at my interment. When all was in readiness for the ceremony, the corpse of my wife, decorated with her jewels and dressed in the most magnificent clothes, was placed on a bier, and the procession set out. As the chief mourner in this dreadful tragedy, I followed the body of my wife, my eyes full of tears, and deploring my miserable destiny. Before we arrived at the mountain, I made an appeal to the compassion of the spectators. I first addressed myself to the king, then to the courtiers who were near me, and bowing to the ground to kiss the hem of the garments, I entreated them to have pity on me. "Consider," said I, "that I am a stranger who ought not to be subject to your rigorous law, and I have another wife and children in my own country." I pronounced these words in a heart-rending tone, but no one seemed moved. On the contrary, the spectators hastened to deposit the corpse in the pit, and soon after I was let down also on another bier, with a jug of water and 7 loaves. At last, one second, nose is being bloody. Hold up. Okay, should be good. At last, this fatal ceremony being completed, they replaced a stone over the mouth of the cave, notwithstanding my paroxysms of grief and my piteous lamentation. As I approached the bottom of the pit, I discovered by the little light that shone from above the nature of the subterranean abode. It was a vast cavern. It might be about 50 cubits deep. I soon smelt an insupportable stench, which arose from the moldering corpses that were strewed around. I even fancied I heard the last sighs of some miserable wretches who had lately fallen victims to this inhuman law. So soon as the bier stopped at the bottom of the cave, I stepped from it to the ground and, stopping my nostrils, went to a distance from the dead bodies. I threw myself on the ground, where I remained a long time, bathed in tears, and with a number of useless exclamations of regret and despair, I made the cavern re-echo. I beat my head and breast and gave way to the most violent grief. Nevertheless, I did not call on death to release me from this habitation of horror. The love of my life still glowed within me and induced me to seek to prolong my days. I felt my way to the bier on which I had been placed, and notwithstanding the intense darkness which prevailed, I found my bread and water, and ate and drank of it. The cave now appeared to be more spacious and to contain more bodies than I had first supposed. I lived for some days on my provisions, but as soon as they were exhausted, I prepared to die. I had become resigned to my fate, when suddenly I heard the stone above me raised. A corpse and a living person were let down. The deceased was a man. It is natural to have recourse to violent means to preserve life when a man is reduced to the last extremity. While the woman was descending, I approached the spot where her bier was to be placed, and when I perceived that the aperture by which she had been lowered was closed, I gave the unhappy creature 2 or 3 heavy blows on the head with a large bone. She was stunned, or to say the truth, I killed her, committing the inhuman action to obtain the bread and water which had been allowed her. Jeez, God's sakes, this is dark. Um, Committing this inhuman action to obtain the bread and water which had been allowed her, I had now provisions for some days. At the end of that time, a dead woman and her living husband were let down into the pit. I killed the man as I had slain the woman, and as at this time there happened, fortunately for me, to be a great mortality in the city. So I was not in want of food, always obtaining my supplies by the same cruel means. Jeez. One day, when I had just put an end to an unfortunate woman, I heard footsteps and a sound like breathing. I advanced in the direction from whence the sound proceeded. I heard a louder breathing at my approach, and I fancied I saw something fleeing from me. I followed this flying shadow, which occasionally stopped, and then again retreated panting as it drew near. I pursued it so long and went so far that at last I perceived a small speck of light resembling a star. I continued to walk towards this light, sometimes losing it as obstacles intervened in my path, but always seeing it again after a time, till I arrived at an opening in the rock large enough to allow me to pass. At this discovery I stopped for some time to recover from the violent emotion occasioned by my rapid chase. Then passing through the crevice, I found myself on the seashore. You may imagine the excess of my joy. It was so great, I could scarcely persuade myself that my imagination did not deceive me. When I became convinced that it was a reality, and that my senses did not play false, I perceived that the thing which I had heard pant, and which I followed, was an animal that lived in the sea, and was accustomed to go into the cave to devour the dead bodies. 1 second. No, I didn't see some. Okay. I returned to the cave to collect from the different biers all the diamonds, rubies, pearls, and golden bracelets. In short, everything of value on which I could lay my hands in the dark, and I brought all my plunder to the shore. I tied it up in several packets with the cords which had served to let down the biers, of which there were many lying around. I left my goods in a convenient place till a proper opportunity should offer for conveying them away. I had no fear of their being spoiled by the rain, for it was not the season for wet weather. At the end of 2 or 3 days, I perceived a vessel just sailing out of the harbor, and passing by the spot where I was. I made signals with my linen turban, and cried aloud with all my strength. They heard me on board and dispatched a boat to fetch me. When the sailors inquired by what misfortune I had gotten in that place, I replied that I had been wrecked 2 days since on that shore, with all my merchandise. Fortunately for me, these people did not stop to consider whether my story was probable, but satisfied with my answer, they took me into the boat with my bales. When we had reached the vessel, the captain, who was glad to be the instrument of my safety, and who was moreover occupied with the management of the ship, never thought of doubting the tale of the wreck. To remove any scruples he might feel, I offered him some precious stones, but he refused them. Okay. We passed several islands, amongst others, the island of Bells, distance about 10 days, sail from that of Serendib. Sailing with fair wind in 6 days from the Isle of Kella, where we landed. Here we found lead mines, some Indian canes, and excellent camphor. The king of the Isle of Kella, is very rich and powerful. His authority extends over the island of Bells, which is 2 days' journey in extent. The inhabitants are still so uncivilized as to eat human flesh. After we had made an advantageous traffic in the island, we again set sail and touched at several ports. At length I arrived happily at Baghdad with immense riches, which I need not describe to you in detail. To show my gratitude to heaven for the mercy shown me, I spent a great deal in charity, giving money for the support of the mosque, for the relief of the poor. I then entirely gave myself up to the society of my relations and friends, and passed my time in feasting and entertainments. Sinbad here concluded the relation of his fourth voyage, which occasioned still more surprise in his audience than had been excited by his 3 preceding accounts. He repeated his present of 100 sequins, to Hinbad, whom he requested with the rest of the company to return on the following day to dine, and hear the story of his 5th voyage. Hinbad and the others took their leave and retired. The next day, when all were assembled, they sat down to the table, and at the conclusion of the repast, Sinbad began the account of his 5th voyage, in the following words, which we will save for later, I think. This was not bad for a nice short little 2-hour stream. Or would you rather I do another? I'm gonna do like some tonight and some later, but if y'all have enjoyed listening while I read, I could do another chapter or 2. But yeah, it's basically the entire this is the original story. God, the original is something else. Can't say enough like just how much I love it. Though, if y'all would rather I continue next time, I can see about setting up a raid to somebody. Maybe. All depends on what you would prefer, because I am the storyteller tonight. And I am happy to tell the stories as long as you would enjoy to listen. It really is nice having like a very chill. Oh, you know what? Hold up. I completely forgot something. Yeah. I forgot to add May as a VIP. Whoops. I know I was forgetting somebody. Sorry. I was trying to add VIPs and I forgot May. That is actually sad. I'm sorry. But, yeah. I actually really like this. This was very calming. You know what? Let's see. Sinbad kills a lot of people, turns out. He has got, like... Let's see. How much was this one? This one's actually kind of short. We'll do the 5th voyage. See, how's... This is 6th? Ah, yeah. The 6th voyage and the 7th voyage are longer ones. Okay. How many pages is this? That is 18 more pages. Let's keep going. The pleasures I enjoyed soon made me forget the perils I had endured. God dang it. Not again, Sinbad. You just got back home and you're like, oh, danger! It sucks. I don't ever want to go out to the ocean again. Unless... Yeah, these lights were not sufficiently attractive to prevent my forming the resolution of venturing a 5th time on the sea. I again provided myself with merchandise, packed it up, and sent it overland to the nearest seaport. Unwilling to trust again to a captain, and wishing to have a vessel of my own, I built and equipped one at my own expense. As soon as it was ready, I loaded it and embarked. And as I had not sufficient cargo of my own to fill it, I received on board several merchants of different nations with their goods. We hoisted our sails to the first fair wind and put to sea. After sailing for a considerable time, the first place we stopped at was a desert island, where we found the egg of a rook, as large as that of which I had spoken on the former occasion. It contained a small rook, almost hatched, for its beak had begun to pierce through the shell. The merchants who were with me broke the egg with hatchets, cut out the young rook piece by piece, and roasted it. I had seriously advised them not to touch the egg, but they would not attend to me. They had scarcely finished their meal when 2 immense clouds appeared in the air at a considerable distance from us. Oh my god, this is brutal. The captain whom I had engaged to navigate the vessel knew by experience what it was, and cried out that the father and mother of the young rook were coming. He warned us to re-embark as quickly as possible to escape the danger which threatened us. We took his advice and set sail immediately. The 2 rooks approached, uttering the most terrible screams, which they redoubled on finding their egg broken and their young one destroyed. Designing to revenge themselves, they flew away towards the mountains from whence they came, and disappeared for some time, while we used all diligence to sail away and prevent what nevertheless befell us. They soon returned, and we perceived that each had an enormous piece of rock in its claw. When they were exactly over our ship, they stopped, and suspending themselves in the air, one of them let fall the piece of rock he held. The skill of the pilot, who suddenly turned the vessel, prevented our being crushed by its fall, but the stone fell close to us, into the sea, in which it made such a chasm that we could almost see the bottom. The other bird, unfortunately for us, let his piece of rock fall so directly on the ship that it broke and split our vessel into 1,000 pieces. The sailors and passengers were all crushed to death or drowned. I myself was under water for some time, but rising again to the surface, I had the good fortune to seize a piece of the wreck, swimming sometimes with one hand and sometimes with the other, still clutching the plank I reached an island where the shore was very steep, but I contrived to clamber up the beach and got on land. I seated myself on the grass to recover from any fatigue. When I had rested, I rose and advanced into the island to... what the hell is this word? Reconnoiter? Reconnoit? That word, reconnoiter, the ground. This region seemed to me like a delicious garden. Wherever I turned my eyes, I saw beautiful trees, some loaded with green, others with ripe fruits, and transparent streams meandering between them. I ate of the fruits which I found excellent, and quenched my thirst at the inviting brooks. Oh, 10 push-ups. Hold up. Pause right there, page 502. Alright, 1 second, going to the side, and I will do those 10 push-ups. Right, I did it for 10. Oi. Alright, 1 second. I'm just gonna do these on the side real quick. I'm still here, by the way. It's just distance. So, part of me as my soul leaves my body. Alright. 1, 2, 3. God's sakes, I'm out of shape. Jeez. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Ah. Ah. Okay. Whew. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Actually, I do need to start doing more strength training, so that is going to be good. Um, all right. I just got set up. All right, I'll do the 10 squats too. I'm counting this one as done. All right. One more time as my soul leaves my body. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Whoops. Balance. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right. Are you about to redeem the 10 sit-ups? No, I shouldn't have sat down. Perfect. Aha. All right. 10 sit-ups as well. Let's see. Okay. Got enough space. Ah. 1, 2, 3. Okay, these are tougher. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm trying to fit in a whole bunch of stuff. Alright. Oh, jeez, my stomach just made a really bad noise. Not big rip. I actually did it. Also, I had to take my headphones off for that. I did it though. I do need to do that more. That's why I gotta press they are. Oh my god, that is loud. Anyways, I think after this chapter, I will have to get going. But yeah, let me get it finished. When night came, I lay down on the grass in a convenient spot. But I did not sleep an hour at a time. My rest was continually interrupted by my fear of being alone in such a desert place. Whew. And I passed the greater part of the night in lamenting my fate, and reproaching myself for the impudence of venturing from home, where I had possessed everything that could make me comfortable. These reflections led me so far that I meditated the idea of ending the journey there. But day returned with its cheerful light, and dissipated my gloomy thoughts. I rose and walked amongst the trees, though not without some degree of trepidation. When I had advanced a little way into the island, I perceived an old man who appeared very decrepit. He was seated on the bank of a little rivulet. At first, I supposed he might be a shipwrecked mariner, like myself. I approached and saluted him. He replied only by a slight inclination of the head. I asked him what he was doing, but instead of answering, he made signs to me to take him on his shoulders. my shoulders and crossed a brook, making me understand that he wanted to gather some fruit. I suppose he wished me to render him this piece of service, and taking him on my back, I waded through the stream. When I had reached the other side, I stooped and desired him to alight. Instead of complying, I cannot help laughing whenever I think about it. This old man, who appeared to me so decrepit, nimbly threw his legs, which I now saw were covered with a skin like a cow's, over my neck and seated himself fast on my shoulders, at the same time squeezing my throat so violently that I expected to be strangled. This alarmed me so much that I fainted away. Freaking cow-leg man. Notwithstanding my condition, the old man kept his place on my neck, and only loosened his hold sufficiently to allow me to breathe. When I had somewhat recovered, he pushed one of his feet against my stomach, and kicking me aside with the other, obliged me to get up. He then made me walk under some trees, and forced me to gather and eat the fruit we found. He never quitted his hold during the day, and when I wished to rest at night, he laid himself on the ground with me, always clinging to my neck. He never failed to awaken me with a push in the morning. And then he made me get up and walk, kicking me all the time. Imagine how miserable it was to me to bear this burden without the possibility of getting rid of it. One day I chanced to find on the ground several dried gourds, which had fallen from the tree that bore them. I took a large one, and after having cleared it well, I squeezed it into it the juice of several bunches of grapes, which the island produced in great abundance. When I had filled the gourd, I placed it in a particular spot, and some days after returned with the old man. On tasting the contents, I found the juice converted into excellent wine, which for a little time made me forget the ills that weighed upon me. The drink gave me new vigor, and raised my spirits so high that I began to sing and dance as I went along. Perceiving the effect this beverage had taken on my spirits, the old man made signs to me to let him taste it. I gave him the gourd, and the liquor pleased his taste so well that he drank it to the last drop. There was enough to inebriate him, and the fumes of the wine very soon rose into his head. He then began to sing after his own manner, and to sway to and fro on my shoulders. The blows he gave himself made him feel very much disturbed, and his legs loosened by degrees, so that, finding he no longer held me tight, I threw him on the ground where he lay motionless. I then took a large stone and crushed him to death. Alright, Diamond. I hope your tooth feels better. Please be careful. I was much rejoiced at having gotten rid of the old man, and I walked towards the seashore, where I met some people who belonged to a vessel which had anchored there to get fresh water. They were very much astonished at seeing me and hearing my account of the adventure. You had fallen, said they, into the hands of the old man of the sea, and you are the first of his captives whom he has not strangled. This island is famous for the number of persons he has killed. The sailors and merchants who land here never dare approach except in strong body. After giving me this information, they took me to their ship, whose captain received me with the greatest politeness. When he heard what had befallen me, he set sail. In a few days, we anchored in the harbor of a large city, where the houses were built of stone. One of the merchants of the ship had contracted a friendship for me. He entreated me to accompany him, and conducted me to the quarters, set apart for foreign merchants. He gave me a large sack, and then introduced me to some people belonging to the city, who were also furnished with sacks. He requested them to take me with them to gather cocoa, and said to me, "Go, follow them, and do as they do, and do not stray from them, for your life will be in danger if you leave them." He gave me provisions for the day, and I set off with new friends. We arrived at a large forest of tall, straight trees, the trunks of which were so smooth that it was impossible to climb up to the branches where the fruit grew. These were all cocoa trees, and we proposed to knock down the fruit and fill our sacks. On entering the forest, we saw a great number of monkeys of all sizes, who fled at our approach, and ran up the trees with surprising agility. The merchants who were with me collected stones and threw them with great force at the monkeys, who had reached some of the highest branches. I did the same, and soon perceived that these animals were aware of our proceedings. They gathered the coconuts and drew them down at us with gestures, which plainly showed their anger and spite. We picked up the coconuts, and at intervals threw up stones to irritate the monkeys. By this contrivance, we obtained nuts enough to fill our sacks. A thing utterly impractical impracticable by any other method. When we had collected a sufficient quantity, we returned to the city where the merchant had sent me to the forest, gave me the value of the coconuts I had brought. At last I had collected such a quantity of coconuts that I sold them for a considerable sum. The vessel in which I came had sailed with the merchants who had loaded it, with the coconuts they had purchased. I waited for the arrival of another, which shortly after came into harbor to take in a cargo of the same description. I sent on board all the coconuts which belonged to me. When the ship was ready to sail, I took leave of the merchant to whom I was under so much obligation. As he had not yet settled his affairs, he could not embark with me. We set sail and steered towards the island where pepper grows in such abundance. From thence we made the island of Kamari, where the best species of aloe is found, and whose inhabitants bind themselves by a law not to drink wine or suffer any kind of debauchery to exist among them. In these two islands I exchanged all my coconuts for pepper and aloe wood, and I then, like the other merchants, engaged on my own account in a pearl fishery, in which I employed many divers. I had soon collected by these means a great number of very large and perfect gems, which with I joyfully put to sea, and arrived safely at Balsara, from whence I returned to Baghdad. Here I sold for a large sum the pepper, aloes, and pearls which I had brought with me. I bestowed a tenth part of my profit in charity, as I had done in return from my former voyage, and endeavored all kinds of relaxation to recover from my fatigues. When he had concluded his narrative, Sinbad gave 100 sequins to Hindbad, who retired with the other guests. The same party returned to the rich Sinbad's house the next day, and after their host had regaled them in a sumptuous manner, as on the preceding days, he requested silence and began the account of his sixth voyage, which we will continue next time I do a reading stream. I do hope you all enjoyed listening to me read for what is that, 2.5 hours? That's not bad. Not bad for a first one. And I mean, yeah, audiobooks can be really nice. I'm not sponsored by any audiobook, so I'm not going to give them any bling. But yeah, some end up being read by the authors, some by special guests and stuff. It's very nice stuff. Um anyways, looking. Um Let me see if I can find somebody to raid real quick. I'm just looking through a few different ones that I've been looking at. Um, don't know about that one. Oh, no problem. Happy to stream for y'all. I think we'll head to uh Uds. I think she's doing a very comfy one. Yeah, let's raid Uds. I think I've rated her before, but she's quite comfy. Yeah. But yeah, this was I think a successful experiment. I'll most likely be doing these every so often, and yeah. I hope you enjoyed. Hope you had a fun time, and I will see you all again the next stream. Good night, everybody.